So, yeah, that's really fucking dumb. Anyway, before we get to the John Oliver and all this other stuff that we were going to watch, because John Oliver cut a video on inflation, I want to talk more about Ben Shabibo, and we'll also get back to the AIDS crisis and how the AIDS crisis changed the LGBT movement, especially as it pertains to what we are talking about today with respect to monkeypox. So we'll look at this really quickly, okay? We'll look at this, and then we'll get back to Ben Shabibo and feminism.
To the gay rights movement. It took decades to reach marriage equality after nationwide demonstrations, even celebrities becoming activists.
Medical experts agree that we are in the midst of an epidemic.
But was it the AIDS crisis and its human toll that really accelerated gay rights in America? Some people say yeah, it was, but not without an immense cost.
It was crushing. It was like nothing else that I had ever experienced.
It was like Russian roulette. We didn't know.
I'm sorry.
This painful but important story goes back to 1969, but not to the well-known Stonewall riots in New York, rather to St. Louis, where a black teenager named Robert Rayford died of pneumonia. At the time, nothing that would make headlines. There's no photo of Robert, not even a firm birthday. And what doctors wouldn't figure out until many years later was that Robert had AIDS, likely making him the first AIDS death in America 50 years ago and 12 years before we ever knew what it was.
It's unimaginable from when we started that we could ever get to the point we're at today. It's been incredible progress, but there's still a lot to do. I think that's what people lose sight of.
Dr. Currier researches HIV/AIDS at UCLA, the same place that was first to report the disease in 1981, prompting an alert from the CDC and sending doctors and the media scrambling to explain what some people simply began calling gay cancer.
Which shows that the lifestyle of some male homosexuals has triggered an epidemic of a rare form of cancer.
I had a friend named Bernard who told me he had gay cancer. And I'm like, what? What is that? And I didn't really understand, and then he was gone. Do you know what I mean?
He died.
Yeah.
That sort of story began playing out across the country as hospitals became overwhelmed by AIDS, especially the one not far from the Castro, San Francisco General, where Rita volunteered and Allison and Cliff worked as nurses.
After the intensive care units filled up, then we started spilling over into the regular units of the hospital. And so that's when things really got kind of out of hand, actually.
Some nurses feared this unknown, unnamed disease so much they wouldn't even go near someone with AIDS. The fear was pervasive.
Carrying an exposed needle, contaminated needle, is a lot like pointing a loaded gun.
But something different began to happen at San Francisco General. Cliff Morrison saw his friends getting sick, dying, and realized AIDS patients needed a special kind of care, which led to the creation of the nation's first AIDS ward, 5B, also the name of a new documentary.
The film also, I think, starts out with you revisiting part of...
Oh, that was hard. That was the hardest thing about doing that.
I imagine it's probably tough to separate place from people.
I didn't really think about the power of that image, you know, what it was going to do.
Lost friends along the way in that place.
Yes.
One of the factors that inspired the opening of the unit was the desire to see the patients as people, not a disease.
How difficult was that, knowing that when people would come in that you probably couldn't save their life?
It was difficult. We kind of knew that, but then I think, speaking for myself, I had this hope. You know, it was still relatively early on. We didn't know how the numbers would grow.
The numbers, the deaths did grow quickly.
Deep breath in.
And with them, so did the fear.
A sizable majority of Americans believes that no segment of the general population will be spared AIDS.
You know, this felt like the end of the world. I've had the opportunity again to kind of revisit. The reason why I'm still working at such a late age is because I didn't plan for retirement, just like everybody else. I thought I was going to be dead. And
You thought you were going to get AIDS and die?
yeah. Yeah, I think most of
I mean, there's a reason why there's not that many like old gay men out there. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of gay men died in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and onward. Like, straight up.
just did.
Despite
An
that
entire generation of gay men died. Like, that's how fucking consequential and insane this shit is.
fear, a growing number of nurses and doctors in Ward 5B did something revolutionary at the time. They touched people with AIDS, countering the belief that you could get AIDS like you get the flu.
So somewhere in my unconscious, there was a concern. But I think what overrode that in my consciousness really was really a passion to provide care and to somehow make a difference in the course of this disease.
Every single day, AIDS.
This is the terrifying reality, though, is that if a disease is seen as impacting like a marginalized community, the government will personally do a poor job of tackling it. They will not give enough resources to it out of negligence, or I would go so far as to say literally out of criminal negligence, like malicious negligence, purposeful negligence, specifically because they're saying, you know, it's just the gay people doing, it's just the gay people dying, and, you know, it's a consequence of their moral degeneracy. Ronald Reagan did not mention the word AIDS publicly for 5 years. Like, when people say, like, oh man, Donald Trump did a lot of COVID, anti-COVID propaganda, ultimately, the Donald Trump administration's handling of COVID, or rather mishandling of COVID, was gigantic and super impactful. But the speed in which the global community tackled this issue head first, developed vaccines, and mass released it as quickly and efficiently as they possibly could, makes it entirely different than the AIDS epidemic. Okay? You cannot comprehend it. You cannot understand. It's just like not to even, you know, compare catastrophic disasters, but straight the fuck up. They avoided it, and they saw it as like an ultimately good thing that these people were dying. It was poor people, it was black people, it was queer people, it was trans people, it was gay people that were dying, and it was drug users that were dying of AIDS, so they didn't care. They considered them to be fucking, you know, personally responsible for their own demise, and that they were being punished for their moral degeneracy or moral decay or whatever the fuck.
AIDS kills all kinds of people, randomly.
This was hysteria. This was fear-mongering. This was craziness. And somebody had to stand up and say, you got to stop this. This can't go on.
The caregivers at 5B were basically doing their own form of activism, trying to show the world that AIDS patients deserve to be treated like everyone else.
This is an NBC News special report.
And they spread that message on national television.
What about that, Dr. Bolberding? What are you learning in San Francisco?
One of the tragedies of the disease is that a person can be infected and feel and appear perfectly healthy and be contagious.
At the same time, something was happening outside hospital walls, on America's streets. As pride parades grew, marches and protests also exploded right along with the AIDS epidemic.
Yet the gay community quickly got the message about AIDS.
One of those AIDS activists was Terry Beswick, photographed here protesting in front of San Francisco police to send a message to his LGBTQ allies.
That they can do something about it, that they can fight back, that they can organize and stage a protest.
Terry's now the executive director of the GLBT Historical Society, and he made a really important point during our conversation. The AIDS crisis galvanized the LGBTQ community like nothing had before, not even Stonewall.
Because I low-key kind of hate this narrative, though. I mean, it's like, yeah, dude, a lot of gay people were dying, so let's look at the positives, you know? You know, a lot a lot of queer people fucking got brutally massacred as a consequence of government inaction in the face of this viral disease that was killing people left and right. But hey, you know, they did a lot of protests, you know, and then were able to get fucking legally married at the federal level, a protected right that 157 Republicans voted against literally 2 weeks ago, by the way. They were able to get that in 2010. Sick. Fire, dude. How sick.
Up until the 80s, discrimination was tough, sure. But now, discrimination and prejudice were actually costing people's lives.
Sorry.
In a sense, it kind of like propelled.
Not even 2010. What the fuck is wrong with me?
The gay rights.
Which is taken, which by the way, was literally, defensive marriage is a democratic concept. It was at least put forward under a democratic leadership. And the Republicans in the House of Representatives in 2022 are currently fucking advocating against it.
Movement forward because it brought to the fore the necessity of survival. We were fighting for our lives, and it forced our community actually even more out of the closet and forced us to organize and fundraise, form new organizations.
Now, decades later, America has marriage equality. We have medicine which nearly eliminates the risk of contracting HIV, and some of the unsung heroes of the AIDS crisis get to walk a Hollywood red carpet for a documentary about their work.
Allison, do you have any idea that you'd be standing here with Holly Berry one day?
No, I had no idea. And
Me either. I mean, I'm with a real hero. Like, she's done some stuff
you know,
that has really changed lives. You know,
we are all heroes, and I feel like I'm standing here with many, many angels who are no longer here. So,
and that's an important point. Every person that we talked to for this story, every single one of them knew at least one, if not dozens, of the 35 million people who've died from HIV and AIDS. And when I asked each of them what they hope for the future, they talked about the progress still yet to be achieved, especially when it comes to the
Anyway, the reason why this is important is not because of the fucking cheery music they cut alongside this shit to talk about how, like, oh man, look at how wonderful it is, and it like really galvanized the LGBTQ community or whatever. The reason why I wanted to show you that and the lack of action from the government specifically was because that's what happens when a disease is marked as like the gay disease, or a disease is marked as disease that is impacting, you know, black people or marginalized communities. You're very negative. No, I'm just a realistic person, okay? That's why, especially on today, okay? Which is like what, isn't this the anniversary of the Associated Press writer who uncovered the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, like, which isn't directly related to, I mean, it's just another form of like brutality that the federal government engaged in across the board towards black people by, you know, giving them fucking disease, literally. And not only that, but also, yeah, the 50-year anniversary of that, yeah. And also, part of the reason why black people are still terrified of getting vaccinated and shit, even to this day, they still use that as an example, understandably. Fuck, I forgot the other thing I was going to mention. God damn it. Anyway, chat distracted me, I know. Yeah, I'm senile now. Dementia is kicking in, boys. Once you're 31, it's over. All right. Another birthday video.
Hey Hassan. Hey chat.
Okay, I don't want to. I don't want to do this yet. Okay, let's do the news and then I'll get back to this. All right. Yeah, I'm 31. I'm a senior.